Welcome to EJH British Cars, and as you can see, it's a rainy day, so we'll not be working on the car itself. I just thought I might find something to do in the garage, so I'm going to look at the steering gear for the TR2 and see if we can't get that apart. So let's get started. So this is the steering column and the steering box. This is what they call the non-adjustable column, so it's a solid column all the way up to here, which is where the steering wheel bolts on. Adjustable column is in two pieces, which is actually kind of nice, but I ain't got what I got. So it says to start, we had to take off this nut, and if you look, there's a steel flat washer underneath with the edges folded up onto the flat, so this wouldn't undo. So I've undone those already, and now I'm going to use my impact gun and take that nut off. So this is 1 1/3 inch thick 16th for anybody that's keeping track. Gotta love impact tools. You would fight with that forever by hand. So that's the nut off. There's that flat washer. You see it's also pinned over on the back side to pick up this flat back here. Now we need to remove this drop arm, and it cautions not to hammer on this because you will muck up the brass stuff on the inside. So you got to use a puller. And there's a special puller, of course, but I'm expecting that a Pitman arm puller will probably work. Well, this is my Pitman arm puller, but unfortunately this distance right here is a little narrow, and before I go and grind it bigger so it'll fit, which I might do because I think this is just a Harbor Freight one, it's not that expensive. I'm going to try this puller, but this puller is not as heavy duty, and I'm not sure it's going to have enough oomph to get this apart. So as you can see, I already fitted it in place. It doesn't seem likely. I'll give it a couple of taps. So I'm going to hold up on this arm and just tap this to shock load it a little bit. See if it'll loosen up, and it doesn't seem that way. No, I don't think so. So I guess we're going to grind on the Pitman arm puller. Get that in. You can see this is a lot heavier duty. So I'll grind on that and we'll get back to you. Well, I got it apart. But this was the Pittsburgh Pitman arm puller. As you can see, those threads, it's stripped it out. I also had to grind it to get it to fit, and I was cranking on it, so it's a pity that it's stripped out. Not really surprising. I mean, this is like a $15 puller. So I went and I bought a better one over at Napa Auto Parts. So this is the Carlisle brand, which it's much the same, but it is much harder. I had to grind the jaws on both of these, and this one took about 5 times as long to do it. It's really hot right now because I got it on there tight and it didn't seem like it was going, so I added some heat. So this is my acetylene setup, which is also from Harbor Freight, so I bought years and years ago. It's a small tank that you can just carry around. So yeah, the tanks don't hold a lot of gas, but for my needs, it's been fine. I did also bought the ratchet handle for the shutoff because those other ones that come with it stock are pretty crappy. But I've been using these for, I'm going to bet 20 years, and they've been fine. It's nice that they're smaller, that I can haul them around pretty easy, and your insurance company will not want you to have big tanks, I got to tell you that. So for the little bit that I use it, I mean, this is mostly how I use it, is just to heat things up. I mean, you cannot heat this up with a MAP gas torch. It's just way too much mass. So it's really good for that. I also wanted to point out I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a line scribed on that shaft, and there's a line scribed on the top of this arm too, and that's the orientation for it. So, you know, I'm not surprised that it was a real bear to take apart. I mean, it's been together for 69 years, you know, so I'm not surprised. And there's probably a rubber seal in here, which is probably buggered up now, but you got to get it apart somehow. Anyway, so that's the first bit. I'm probably going to pack it in for today now. I'll get back in on it tomorrow. And if you're interested, this is the Pitman arm puller I bought from Neff Auto Parts, part number 2289. And I don't have it sitting here, but it looks a lot like that, but it's just better quality. And it worked a charm. I just tightened it up and got it fairly tight, and then just took the acetylene torch, heated the arm just around the perimeter, about 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden I hear a ping, and it had shifted. Also, there's the mark in the arm that lines up with the mark on the shaft, which we'll have to get lined up when we go to put this back together. Anyway, so it now says loosen the bolts on the clamp, and I guess this bracket is clamped onto there. This is how it bolts to the frame. Let's get that out of there. Because this bracket is the reason why we couldn't use the 30-ton press to pull this arm off, because there's just no way to get underneath it with anything that I have. So just driven a small chisel in there. You can see that loosened it up. This piece ought to come right off now. Boy, this thing is dirty. Well, it says to take these screws out and lift the cover off. This is the adjustment screw. It doesn't seem to say do anything with that at this point. There we go. And it still had oil in it, yay. Next it says to remove this shaft while protecting the seal that's in here with a thin piece of shim stock. So I got this copper. There we go. So there is the shaft. And it looks to be in good condition too. That line is where the seal engages. You can just barely feel a little ridge in there. And this pin doesn't look too worn, so that's good. Well, it says next to remove this piece on the end. Look at that. Even the gasket's going to come off in one piece. So this is the outer race. I just used a small screwdriver just to gently pry that a little bit. There was some pre-tension on that. So once it started to come out, it kind of popped it out. And this bearing is caught in here somehow or another. There we go. Put a little pressure on that shaft, and that released the bearing. This is interesting. This is truly a ball bearing, but it has a cage that holds it all in place. And of course the race. I call this the cam. This is the upper bearing. Something just fell on the ground. What is that? How well you can see up in here. But there's the other race. And that looks like the bits of rubber that were falling out right behind it. So I had purchased an upper column bushing, improved, from Rimmers. These are the instructions. So for the non-adjustable, you only need one. So this is the end where the felt washer was. This is the steering wheel side, so the felt sleeve. So what I did is, as you remember, the two rubber bands that were in the middle were all broken up. I pushed the felt washer down to the midpoints. My belief is that the rubber bands being in the midpoint are really just here so that if the column bounces over bad roads and hits, it doesn't go clang, it just goes thunk. So I took a spark plug socket, 13/16 spark plug socket, and just the felt sleeve was actually a flat piece wrapped around, so you could compress it and fold it over on itself a little bit to get past this ridge in the column. And then I just pushed it down halfway with the spark plug socket. So the improved bushing is just, this is what's used in a TR4 type column, TR4, TR5, TR6. So what I did have to do is you have to cut or drill a pair of holes here, which I did on the drill press because they're supposed to be, you know, midpoint perpendicular, so I have a centering guide in the drill press, so it was fairly easy. And drilled out to 9.8 millimeters, which is, I think the closest fractional drill I had was 3.9, I think. Anyway, so you can see that that will fit that bung. It doesn't have to be a super tight fit. It's just there so this column won't ride up and down, and then we're going to have to push this in there, and I'll get a little flat screwdriver or something and get that in, and I'll probably put a little rubber lube on it. All right, well, I put a hose clamp across those pins and covering them completely, and that's hopefully going to work the same way that a piston ring compressor works. So I still want to make sure that they're pretty well lined up. Let's see if we can push this in. Well, that worked pretty easily. And there we go. Had it well lined up. You can see the rubber things came through. I'll work that one in a little bit. Okay, so got things cleaned up, and got a new seal and made some gaskets. So it's time to put it together. Now, the first thing is to put this bushing in. We didn't remove the old one because it's in good shape, so don't have to worry about that. Next thing it says is to install this, and it says that that bracket goes forward and down. This box is upside down right now, so down is up. You got a door sign or something. And I suppose we had a wedge in here originally to help that get in. Now let me drive this in. So I'm just using a cold chisel as a wedge, and that fits pretty well. Oh, we got to take the bolt out of there because of that groove that's in the sleeve. So hopefully that will let that go down all the way. Now, better. There we go. And it says not to do this up too tight because you're going to need to adjust it when we get it back in the car anyway. I'll take my wedge out. There we go, that's plenty tight for now. So we'll put the arm on. It says fix the upper ball race into the steering box, and we never took it out, so hopefully it is still right there. And next it says we should position this shaft. Now, I put that felt in here to act as a bumper, but what I was thinking, because I don't have any replacement rubber rings, and I'm sure they're on a titanium, but there's nothing to stop us from throwing a couple of O-rings on here. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to shut you guys off for a second. Alrighty, so we put 3 O-rings on, and just something that was snug, not too snug. And I slid in the ball bearing into place. And now this goes back up into this shaft. I'm just carefully working it past that felt piece that's in the middle. Clean. So it says next. Place that on its race. So we're done. And then I'm going to need to press this outer race into position. That is done, and it's really just kind of floating there. It's probably the same size. It's not an interference fit. The thing is, the end plate's going to put the pressure on that. It says fit a fresh joint washer, and that's actually the paper gasket. So hang on a second. So this has actually got 4 shims in it right now. It has 2 steel and 2 brass. So you want to make sure that this stuff is all really nice and clean. Because 2 brass, 2 steel shims, and they'll fit over that. And that looks like it's going to have some preload, so that's good. And I'm going to put some gasket sealer in here. Not too heavy. Here's my new paper gasket. Put that on there. And my 4 shims. So we get a couple of these, 2 of these screws started. That should hold everything in alignment. And the paper gasket is a little snug, so that kind of holds the bolts, so that's nice. This plate seems to be symmetrical, so there's not a particular way up that I see. So put it on the end here. Get the screws started. Everything is turning, but there is no end slack, so we just put the same pack in that came out, and that seems to have worked quite well, so that's good. So next it says to press the new oil seal in. So this is a seal I picked up this morning. It's part number Napa 8660, and it's 1 3/8 inch outer by 7/8 inner. And that's going to go with that side facing in. And I think this will probably just tap in. Feed the rocker shaft with its bore through the top of the steering bus. Allow the conical pin to settle in the groove on the cam. So that would be this piece. Okay, so one thing I want to do is I'm going to put a little grease on this shaft. So I want to make sure I lubricate this rubber seal when I push this. There we go. Now I have to admit that, modern O-rings are neoprene, so they're probably stronger or more resistant to abuse. So there it is, it's in place. The cam's locked in. It says to back this off so that this doesn't interfere and stop it from sealing down properly, so we can do that. Alright, so I loosened the lock nut and then it turned it out of assembly, so that gives you an idea where it was to start with, and I brought it back flush with that, so that should not interfere. And we're going to put a little joint compound. So it only fits one way. It's not symmetrical. So make sure you get it around the right way. There we go. Now there must be some way to adjust that. I'm sure they're going to tell us. Alright, so now it's saying to attach the drop arm. Wipe off some of we know which way is up because of the scribe mark, so it goes with the offset facing the box. And here's my mark on the rocker shaft. Oh, well, you're going to see this. You should be able to see those two line up. So when I went to put the nut on, it didn't want to go more than about 2 threads, and I found out there was some abrasion into the threads, which was the portion of the stud that was sticking beyond this nut, so it must have got hit with something over the years. God only knows. Anyway, I don't have a depth that's like 5/8, 18, but I do have a thread file, which are very handy, so I just cleaned that up. And now that goes on like it should. Let's put a little Loctite on here, just like we do with everything. And then use the air gun to run that in. And there it is. Just turn it with my fingers against these tiny splines. And that's going back and forth. So that's all good. That's working. And now it says to adjust this down till you just feel some resistance in the center position. So apparently what it is when it's straight ahead, I suppose it's also, well, they must cut it that way because it's just, that's running in an arc and that's rolling it back and forth, but there's a little resistance in the center, so when you're driving straight down the road it doesn't want to wander or else. So I don't know. Anyway, that should be it. So what it is, there's no oil seal up here, so you could actually, that's facing up, you could actually fill that with oil, I suppose. But it also has a fill plug here. It's much easier to fill it there. And you just fill it, I'm sure, until it's up to the edge. And because this thing is in the car like that, it's never going to go uphill that far. So so all that's left is to put some gear lube in there, like SAE 90 gear oil, like you'd use in an axle or something. and then we'll see how it feels after we get it back in the car. May make some final adjustments, because this will also, if there is, the harder you push it into the cam, the less slack there'll be as far as clearance wise. And of course I'm going to clean this off with some lacquer thinner, and I'll paint the whole thing black, make it look pretty. But that's it. I almost forgot, don't forget to bend this flat washer up to lock that nut into place. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I had never had a TR steering box apart. Almost everything I've owned had rack and pinion steering, so this being older, I think the only other steering box I really had apart was in my 65 Chevy pickup truck, which is very similar to that, but about 3 times as big. With some of the same issues, I had a really hard time getting the pitman arm off the truck. I had to put it in the 30-ton press and really push on it and heat. That the pitman arm pullers wouldn't work on that, but it's a 3/4 ton truck. It's a lot bigger piece of metal. Anyway, I digress. I've not seen anybody else put a video on YouTube about taking a steering box apart. We didn't rebuild it per se, because we didn't replace that bushing and or any of the other parts. I mean, you can get a new cam, but it's crazy expensive. I don't know how hard it is to change out on that shaft. And I've not seen anything about the arm, because the arm is steel, the cam's brass, so I suppose if it wears out, it wears the brass out. And I suppose that the only real way you would have worn it out is if it had been driven dry. This one, when we took it out, it still had oil in it. And of course, the car's not been driven for over 30 years. I got it in 1995. So, you know, it's been pushed a few hundred yards since then. And it was already in a field in a wood pile in 1995, so I'm going to guess it hasn't gone anywhere since the 80s. So, anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, join, and share, and we'll see you next time.